Okay, so in this video, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about the basics of Premiere Pro. Ooh, that rhymes. Hey guys, you're watching Dansky, the place to be to develop your creative skills. In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through the basics of Premiere Pro so you can get started with video editing. But before we begin, this video is in partnership with MSI, and some of you who watch my content regularly may recognize this portable 15-inch beast, MSI's P65 Creator laptop. And here's a quick rundown on the specs. So we have an i9 processor, 32 gigs of RAM, a terabyte of SSD storage, and an NVIDIA RTX 2070 for the graphics, which by the way is also very good for PC gaming on ultra settings. Also for the designers, the screen is 100% Adobe RGB color accurate, which means that you won't look like a twat sending design work to print that hasn't been checked on a correctly color calibrated display. It's also super light at 4.1 pounds and can potentially go for up to 8 hours on battery power. Obviously, depending on what you're doing and how power hungry your apps are. So as always, link in the description if you'd like to check it out. But without further ado, let's get started. Rightio, so we're now in Premiere Pro and you can see I've created a new project already. Now you can do this from the welcome screen when you start up Premiere Pro, or you can go to File, down to New, and you can create lots of new things here. We're going to select Project. You'll see a window like this appear. Give this a name, so Tutorial. Go to Browse and select a location to save your Premiere Pro project file. You don't need to worry too much about any of the other settings for the time being, and then just click OK and it will create that project. Although I've already done this, so I'm going to click Cancel. So there we go, super easy. That's the first step, creating your Premiere Pro project file. Next, what we're going to do is jump into the user interface, and I'm just going to walk you through everything so you know where the main panels that we're going to be using are. So this is the user interface for Premiere Pro, and like many other Adobe apps, we go up to Window. We can see all the different panels that we can turn on or off. You can fully customize these to create your own workspace. You can see here we have lots of different presets. I've actually created a Dansky workspace that I use for recording a lot of my other videos, and I'm currently using the editing workspace. Now I can make changes to any of these presets and I can switch between all of them really quickly, and I can then save those changes. I can reset it to the saved layout, or I can save this as a new workspace entirely and give it a name. So if your workspace doesn't look like mine, remember I'm using the editing workspace. It should look very similar. And we'll start in the bottom left corner. So we have the project panel here. This is indicated by the blue highlighted area. You can see I can click around to different panels and they become selected. So the project panel essentially is where you will store all of your assets. So your video files, your photos, your audio files, they will all be listed and hopefully well organized down here. Now up here, you can see I currently have effect controls selected. This is where we're going to add and edit a lot of different settings for our effects and transitions. So we'll come back to this bit a little bit later in the video. Source monitor or source window. Essentially, this allows us to preview a piece of video or a piece of audio or a photo. Any asset that we have in our project panel, we can preview that up here. And then over on the right, we have the main preview window. This is where we're going to preview our main project, our final composition that we're working on. And below that, we have the timeline. So this is where we're going to spend most of the time actually editing our video. You'll see all the clips on here, the audio, you'll apply your effects. This will be where we spend a lot of time. And what you see up here in the preview window is essentially that coming to life. And then down here, we also have some more controls for how we navigate that preview. So we can play it, we can go back one frame, forward one frame, go back to the beginning, lots of different settings. And if you click on the plus icon, you get a lot more settings as well. And you can actually drag and drop these on or off. So if I just drag this one down here, you can see I can move this around. So you can fully customize this toolbar here. Over here on the right, we have the audio levels. So the left and the right channel and the number of decibels. And then over here, we have the toolbar. Now this is a much more streamlined toolbar than many of Adobe's other design-based apps. So we have the main selection tool that allows us to select objects on our timeline. We can drag them around, resize them. There are some other ones here: track select forward, ripple edit, slip tool. I don't use these. I probably should be using them, but you don't really need to use them. They're probably just going to make your life a lot easier, so I probably should be using them. The razor tool is incredibly useful. However, this is essentially a tool that allows you to make a cut in a clip. So you could split a clip in half. You can chop out bits of a clip. So that's incredibly useful, and you'll probably be using that quite a lot. We also have the pen tool that you can use for various things, the hand tool to help you pan around your timeline, and then the type tool to help you add some text. And you can see I've got lots of other panels here as well that I can navigate between, and I can right click and close these down. Many of these panels I'm not actually going to need. And I think the effects panel, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that over here because we will be using this later on in the tutorial. And it seems to dominate quite a large space. So I'm just going to resize this. Make sure my workspace is well proportioned. I want a nice big timeline because that's where I'm going to be spending a lot of time. And we'll split these preview windows down the middle. So once you've fully customized your workspace, it's definitely a good idea to go and save that. Remember, you can go to Window, down to Workspaces, and select Save Changes to this workspace. And we also have the usual File, Edit, and then a bunch of other categories at the top that allow you to do additional functions. Okay, so that's the user interface. Next, we're going to jump into the project panel. This is something that you're going to be using from the very beginning, so it makes sense to cover this one first. Okay, so let's go to the project panel and we'll click inside. You can see it becomes highlighted with the blue outline. Now we can double click to import some content, or what we can do is go to File, down to Import. And I've got some 4K footage of a river here and an audio track of Jingle Bells. Don't ask me why, it seemed like a good idea at the time. So we now have our footage. What I can do is I can right click this. I could change the color, and that just changes the label color over here. So if you want to have all of your footage a certain color to help keep it organized, let's try a different color that's actually distinctly different. Let's go for rose. There we go. So we have 2 bits of footage. We can change the preview. So I can actually view the footage here as well and scrub through it. And we can also create something called bins. Bins are essentially folders. So I'm going to call this assets. And then I'm going to hold shift and select these and drag them inside. So now I can expand and collapse this, and I can preview my assets, and it helps me just keep everything nice and organized, because when you work on a large project, you're going to have lots and lots of assets. It just makes life so much easier. And do you know what else makes them easier? I'm going to right click and label them all the same color. There we go. Much better. So first of all, we're going to start by double clicking on the thumbnail of our river footage, and I can play this here. Ah, that's nice. Nice, relaxing river. Now, if you are struggling to play this back or you're on older hardware, you can actually change the preview here. You can drop this down if you like. But because we're using the P65, I'm going to keep this nice and high. So half or full. Full is a little bit unnecessary because it will play that as a full 4K clip. But unless I'm playing it for screen, it's in this tiny window. So there's no real need to do that. So half is usually good. Unless you're doing a full screen preview, then what you're going to want to do is crank this up as high as it will go. So again, we've got another toolbar along the bottom here, and I can click the plus. I can customize that if I really want to. But more often than not, what we're going to want to do is load up some content in this source window, and we're going to find a point in the video, and we're going to want to extract that point. So if I select mark in, you can see it marks an in point. I can scrub forward and I can mark an out point. And then I can use these arrows here to jump to the in or the out points. So I can jump to the beginning. That's the new beginning that I've created and defined as an in point. And I can then play that or press the spacebar. And it will start playing from that point. So I just want this piece of video. So then what I'm going to do is I can grab this one here on the left to select the video, or this one on the right to select the audio, and I can just drag the video to the timeline. And you can see it will create a new sequence that we can now view in that timeline window. And you can also drag your footage straight from the project panel onto the timeline, and if there's nothing there already, it will create a new timeline. But because we're going to be creating a new sequence for our timeline in the next section, I'm just going to go edit and undo, and I'll show you how to create a sequence from scratch. Okay, so there's a look at the project panel. Next, we're going to be taking a look at the timeline. Now, this is where you are going to spend the bulk of your time actually editing your video clips, cutting them, moving audio around, all that good stuff. So we'll jump back to the screen and take a look. Okay, so over here we have the timeline, and I can select this, but we have no sequence. So a sequence is essentially something that we can add video clips to, and audio clips, and add content to. And as I say, it's going to be where you spend the bulk of your time, but we haven't actually created a sequence yet. If you didn't just drag your footage on here and it created a sequence with settings that match your footage and you want to create it from scratch, well, what you need to do is go up to File, down to New, and select Sequence. And you'll see this window pop up. We've got lots of presets here. If you're filming with a RED camera or a DSLR, you've got lots of presets. Personally, I like to go to Settings. Again, we've got more presets. I like to just choose Custom, set my frame rate, so I usually record at 30 frames a second. And then I'm recording at 4K. So these are the dimensions for 4K. You could also do 1920 by 1080 or whatever size you like. I typically keep this at square pixels. The audio is typically between one of these two, but it depends if you have any audio, what frequency it was recorded at. And then we'll just keep this down here, the preview file format, as iframe only MPEG. You don't need to worry about all of this too much. Just make sure you get the frame rate, the document size correct, and yeah, that should be good enough to get you started. Oh, and you can also give it a name down here as well. So we'll call this Awesome Sequence. Click OK. We now have our sequence listed here. I'm going to drag this outside of my assets like so. We have Awesome Sequence. Now, if you do close this down by mistake, or even if you do it deliberately, you can double click on the thumbnail and it loads this sequence back up here. So think of a sequence as its own timeline, and when you get more advanced, you can nest multiple sequences inside another sequence, but we'll keep things simple at the moment. So inside the sequence, we have V1, 2, and 3. Those are our video tracks. And below, we have A1, 2, and 3. Those are our audio tracks. Now we can actually click and add tracks or delete tracks with a right click. And what we can also do is we can hide or show a track. We can lock it and unlock it just so we don't move it by mistake. And with our audio tracks, we can mute selected tracks, or we can solo a particular track, which means that it will only play that track on its own, nothing else. And if you have a microphone connected to Premiere, you can also record a voiceover from here. And if you do want to make any changes to this sequence, you can go up to Sequence at the top, down to Sequence Settings, and you get this dialog box pop back up. Okay, so let's close this one down. So first of all, I'm going to go to my Assets folder, expand this out, and we'll drag this to the timeline. And you can see it's actually quite small. We can zoom in and out of the timeline using plus and minus on the keyboard, or you can use the scrolling wheel on your mouse or the trackpad on your laptop to navigate around. So move it up and down, left and right. And depending on what device you're using to navigate, you can also hold down Alt or Option to zoom in or out and drag or scroll. And you can also use Shift to navigate around as well. So experiment with your device, use your scroll wheel, hold Shift, hold Alt or Option, and you can navigate around your timeline pretty quickly and easily once you get familiar with it. So I'm just gonna zoom out a little bit here and then jump back to the very beginning. And this does have an audio clip attached to it. I don't know if there is any audio, but regardless, I can right click, unlink the video from the audio, and just select the audio and hit delete or backspace to remove it. And I can also hover inside this part of the track on the left, hold Alt or Option, and then scroll up or down, and that will increase or decrease the size of that track. And if I do make it big enough, I get a nice preview of that track here as well, which is quite handy when you have lots of different clips together. So something else I can also do is I can right click on the end of a clip. So if I select it and then hover over the end, you get this red arrow. I can right click and select Apply Default Transition. Now my default is a crossfade, So I can scrub through and you can see this will fade out. And I can hit play or press spacebar as well. And it will play this clip and just fade out like so. I can also hover over the end of the transition and make the transition play out over a longer duration or a shorter one. So if I play this again, you'll see it fades out over a longer period of time. Something else I can also do is right click on this piece of video and we get a lot of different options. You can explore all of these in your own time. There's a lot to learn here. But to keep things simple, we can adjust the speed and duration. So let's reduce the speed to 50%. You can actually reverse the video as well if you want to. I'm going to click OK and you can see it becomes longer and it will play the video back much, much slower. Now something else we can do is we can grab that razor tool I mentioned earlier. The shortcut for that is C on the keyboard. And we can make some cuts in our clip. So I've made a few cuts there simply by clicking. And then with the main selection tool, I can grab these clips, I can drag them up onto different tracks. I could press delete or backspace to remove them. And I can manually drag these clips together, but there's a much easier way. So I can just hover over the space in between, right click and select ripple delete. And what it does is just close that gap and bring everything together. And what I might do actually is just take this clip here, remove that as well, and close the gap. Let's have a look at that. So you can see it jumps forward. So I can right click where these two clips meet and do the same thing, apply a default transition, and it will blend those together. And before we finish looking at the timeline, let's just grab our Jingle Bells track. I don't know why I chose this. We'll go back to the beginning and we'll play it. Just no. Just no. In fact, whereas we increased or decreased the speed with the video, you can actually right click on audio, and a really quick way to adjust the gain or the volume is to just open this up. We'll bring that to, let's say, -15, and you can see it just becomes that little bit more tolerable. Just a little bit. Okay, so there's a look at the timeline. Next, we're going to take a look at the effects panel and how we can add some cool visual and audio effects. And if you've seen some of my previous videos where I do go a little bit crazy, then these panels are what I used to create those bonkers effects. Okay, so we have our effects panel up here. And remember, if you don't see yours, just go to Window, down to Effects. It should pop up and you can dock that anywhere you like within your workspace. So first of all, at the top, we have presets. I've actually done a separate video on presets before. Please use them. They're incredibly invaluable. They will save you a ton of time. You can see all of mine here. Basically, when you create different types of effects, you can save those as presets and then simply just drag and drop them onto a clip, and it saves you having to recreate something you may use multiple times from scratch every single time. So they're really, really good. They're basically presets of a combination of settings. And down here we have the fun stuff. We have video effects, so we can expand this down. Let's go and find something fun. We've got distort. Let's go with magnify. I've got no idea what this does. Let's drag this onto this clip here. And then if I go up to effect controls, because this now has an effect on it, with that clip selected, you can see magnify becomes listed. You have motion, opacity, and time remapping. These are all standard for video clips, and you can use them to adjust things like position and scale. But any additional effects become listed underneath, and you can stack up multiple effects, and you can toggle it off and back on by clicking the effects icon. So let's see what this does. Oh, okay, interesting. Oh. We can have a square. We can adjust the size. I see, makes sense. Magnify, I see. Okay, so we're just magnifying the middle. I think I might go for the circle actually. So we can just select that clip, change that again, maybe feather the edge. So you get like a real-time preview of how it's changing, which is really, really helpful. And let's do something even more bonkers. We'll go with wave warp. And if I scrub through the video, and adjust the wave height, you can see some of these effects are pretty crazy. In fact, I'm just going to turn off the magnify one for now. We'll play that again. And then it fades into the normal clip that doesn't have the crazy warp effect. So, well, that was a lot of fun, and you can obviously tell that when I do this in my videos, I have a ton of fun doing this. So we've got video effects. You've got the same effects that you can apply to audio. You can see there are many there. It looks intimidating. Don't worry about it. We're going to be covering the essential sound panel later on in the video that's going to make audio much, much simpler. I don't understand what half of these mean, and some of them are incredibly complicated. Okay, so we've got some video transitions. So let's pick a fun one. I love this, VR Mobius Zoom. I use this all the time. So we'll drag this onto an existing default transition, and you can see there, it replaces it. Or what you can do is just drag a transition onto the end of a clip, or the point where two different clips meet, and it will then add that transition. And if I click on the transition itself rather than the clip, you can see in the Effect Controls panel, I get some options. So essentially, if you click on a clip or a transition, up here in the Effect Controls panel is where you can edit those properties. So let's just zoom in here. You can see this is absolutely bonkers, this one. So I'll scrub through, halfway through the transition, select the transition itself, and then we can go in and make this look as ridiculous as possible. There we go, fantastic. And I can play this through. And you can see here, the more effects I apply, the more that this turns red and this turns yellow, and areas that have been rendered already are green. Now this is where that hardware is going to really help you out. If you have something with a powerful processor and a powerful graphics card, it's going to make rendering this out and avoiding choppy playback all the more easier. So something like the P65 is going to make it so much easier, especially when you're adding effects to 4K video clips. And something else you can also do to help make everything just play back a bit smoother is if you go away for 5 minutes to make a cup of tea or a coffee or use the toilet, whatever it is, go to sequence and just render in to out. Now we haven't defined an in and out point on our timeline, so the in and out is just the entire timeline. And again, depending on the power of your computer, this might take a bit longer or it might take a bit less time. But as it renders, you can see down here that the bar turns green. Essentially, when it turns green, it means that it's pre-rendered. So it's just going to play back a little bit smoother, and it takes a bit longer to render those effects as well. So this is a really good way of just making your editing life and your playback smoother if you're not at your computer for a few minutes. So just get in the habit of getting this render going if you go away for a few moments. Okay, so there's the effects panel. Honestly, you can have a ton of fun with that, but next what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the Lumetri color panel. Now this might sound strange, Lumetri, what does that mean? I know I'd never heard it before I started doing video for YouTube, but essentially it means we can edit the color or color grade our video. So let's go up to Window, down to Lumetri Color. What a strange word. Now I'm a bit pushed for space here, so I'm going to close down the effects panel and just squeeze this up. I've got plenty of space to access those sliders. We definitely don't need our audio channels being that big. There we go. Cool. So what I can do is I can select a clip here, and then I get a bunch of different categories. And it was at this point the screen recording unexpectedly froze for around 3 minutes. So yeah, that was fun. The screen recording froze, but don't worry, I've come back into the studio. This is future Dan, and I'm gonna re-record the section on the Lumetri color panel, and then at the end, I'm just gonna pass it back to other Dan, and he's gonna finish off the rest of the video. So we'll jump back into the screen now. Not like literally into the screen. Rightio, so we're back in Premiere Pro, and I'm gonna try and pick this up where we left off. So we have our clip. We've got this crazy wave warp effect. And now we're going to go and apply a color grade. So up here we have the effects panel still. What I'm going to do is just close this down and then go to Window and down to Lumetri Color. And let's just bring this out just so we can see a little bit more. Now we've got a lot of different categories here, and we can turn these off and on if we like to preview how our video looks without one applied. And we can expand these here. So we have a bunch of different settings. We have input LUT. LUT stands for lookup table. Think of this as like a color profile. So we could add this like so. I'll set that back to none. And we have some settings below that if you are familiar with Photoshop, some of these will look quite familiar. So we could adjust the temperature and just warm the image up a little bit. We can adjust things like exposure, contrast, maybe drop the shadows down, adjust the blacks, and even tinker with the saturation. So this is just one category, and you can tinker around with these settings and you get a preview in real time of how that is going to affect your video. So if I just quickly go through these, we've got some looks here. There's lots of different looks that you can scroll through and a bunch of different settings and sliders. We've got curves, color wheel, so you can change the colors of the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights in your image. HLS secondary, I don't really use this personally. It's incredibly useful if you do decide to use it, but it can be quite complicated. So if you're new to Premiere Pro, you can always steer clear of this one for now. And then vignette, which allows you to, of course, add a vignette to your image and then customize exactly how you'd like that to look. So there are some fantastic tutorials by some very talented creators on YouTube that will go into color grading in a bit more depth. It is incredibly complex, but if you want to just kind of crack the basics, just go for basic correction and you have a bunch of different settings here. So we've applied that color grade to our footage down here. And you can see over in the effect controls panel, we have Lumetri color, and we can twizzle these down and we have all those different settings that we can fine tune from there if we like. And we can also turn the Lumetri color effect off and back on by clicking the effects icon. Now, we've applied this color grade directly to this clip. If you have hundreds of clips in a single Premiere Pro project, well, if you're going to apply that color grade to one and then you apply it to some others and you want to make a change, you've got to then go and reapply it, and it's not a very efficient way of working. So what I'm going to do is right click on this clip where I've applied those settings and go to copy. And it will copy all those attributes from that color grade, in fact, from the entire effect controls panel to the clipboard. So now I can go ahead and remove them. Just right click the clip, select remove attributes, select what you'd like to remove. So everything is checked. This will return it to its original form. And then over here in the project panel, we have the new icon, and you can create lots of new things here. We're going to select adjustment layer, and we'll leave the dimensions the same as the document, leave the time base at 30 frames a second as well. And you can see I've actually created one already over here. So we'll just grab that adjustment layer and we'll lay that on the track above and just extend this out to cover all of our video footage. So what an adjustment layer does is you can apply different effects and color grades to the adjustment layer, and then everything below it, so all of these video clips here, will be affected by the adjustment layer that is on top. So let's just say I have hundreds of video clips. I can now select the adjustment layer, right click, and go paste attributes. Select what I want to paste. So in this case, it's just the Lumetri color. Click OK. And you can see we now have that color grade applied to the adjustment layer. So if I shorten this and just slowly scrub through, we have our color grade. And then it goes back to the original image when the adjustment layer is no longer present. So if you have lots of video, you can apply that color grade or some effects to the adjustment layer. And if you want to change that, rather than having to update the effects on every single clip, you just do it to the adjustment layer and it will affect everything underneath it. Okay, so there's a brief look at the Lumetri color panel that you can use to adjust the color and essentially color grade your footage in Premiere. There's loads of tutorials as well by very talented videographers and cinematographers on YouTube as well. So it's definitely worth checking those out if you like something that goes a bit more in depth. But anyway, next we're going to move on to essential graphics and essential sounds. Okay, so these are awesome. Let's close down Lumetri color for now. Go to window and down to essential graphics, boom, 1, and essential sound 2. And you can see you can also stack your panels side by side so you can switch between them if you are a little bit tight for space on your screen. So we do have some templates here. I don't really use these too much. What I do use though is if I select the type tool, click anywhere on the preview and type some text, we'll go hello. You can see with hello selected, I also get some properties here in the effect controls panel, but I can also switch between browse and edit at the top. And I've got lots of different properties for my text. So I could make it massive for a start. I think we'll make it, well, we'll go with like a lime green, just why not? We could make it bolder because of course, and I could centrally align it. And most importantly, you'll love this. We can just one click and it will vertically and horizontally align it to the center, as well as use the alignment tools here to align it to other things. So this is really, really useful if you have text, photos, or graphics and you just want a little bit more control over them. And if we hop along one, we have essential sound. I'm just gonna make my timeline a little bit bigger. There we go. So essential sound is incredibly useful. It's more of a recent addition that just makes it so much easier for people who aren't sound engineers like myself, or let's be honest, most of us, where we can just create awesome audio, get much better audio, but we don't need to have the technical knowledge to get there. So if we select our audio, it helps us get started. Well, what is it? Is it dialogue, music? And you'll get a tailored suite of effects, sliders, dials and things. So let's click on music because of course jingle bells. We have the preset here where we can choose a few different presets. We can adjust ducking, which is really cool. So Premiere Pro detects when you're speaking and ducks the audio or makes it quieter when you are talking, then brings it back up. And you can see this is such a simple interface. Sliders and things, and it's really not that difficult. You can adjust the levels and mute, and it really is very straightforward. In fact, let me give you a comparison. I'll go to effects. I'm going to type in Parametric Equalizer. We'll add that on here. I'll go to edit the Parametric Equalizer. This is just one of the audio effects. And like this is so in depth. And I mean, it's incredibly powerful, don't get me wrong, but my goodness, it can be so complicated if you're just getting started. Like, all I see here is a mountain. I don't know how to make this good. So yeah, if you are new to Premiere Pro, Essential Graphics and Essential Sound has got you covered. So yeah, the Essential Graphics and the Essential Sound panels, both incredibly useful and really good if you're just getting started in Premiere. So the last thing we're going to do now is jump back to the screen and we're going to export our video. I mean, I say export our video, I use the word video very loosely. This is this is pretty terrible. But anyway, select the timeline of the sequence you would like to export, go up to File, and down to Export, select Media, and you'll see a window like this pop up. Now, if you haven't defined an in and out point, just select Entire Sequence. You can actually check this box up here to match your sequence settings. And we've got lots of different formats. H.264 is really good. You get pretty decent quality and the file size is a lot smaller than some of the other file formats. I use this quite often. You can also click on this here and specify a file save location. You can check whether you want to include video and audio. You've got lots of different tabs here where you can go through and fine tune things. For the most part, I use the audio one where you can just scroll down, just check your sample rate, a few other settings, and then go into the video one. And it's basically pulling through from the document. So we've got our 4K width and height dimensions. We have the frame rate of 30. And what you can do is you can uncheck this and then go and make changes if you wanted to drop this down to 1920 by 1080, or you wanted to change the frame rate. And I'm also going to check render at maximum depth and use maximum render quality. Now that is it for the most part. Then just click export. Or what you can do is select queue and add it to Adobe Media Encoder, and you can queue up multiple videos and then export them all in one go. But we're just going to export this one. And again, depending on your hardware, that is going to determine how slow or quick this processes. But as I say, for video, I can't recommend enough powerful hardware, especially something with a good processor, and a good graphics card. So yeah, another shameless plug for MSI's P65. It's very good. And once your video has finished exporting, you will have a video file at your specified location and you can upload it to anywhere on the internet. So guys, that concludes the tutorial. Thank you so much to MSI for sponsoring this video. If you want to check out this beast, the P65, there will be a link in the video description. And if you have any questions or comments, you know what to do, drop those down there as well. But as always, like this video if you enjoyed it. Take care and I'll see you next time.